October 26, 2017. Halloween is right around the corner, and while most people are decorating their homes with pumpkins and ghosts, I feel a familiar anger creeping up inside me. Halloween, the day everyone looks forward to, the night when kids dress up and go door to door, asking for candy. It's the one day that I can't stand. Just seeing those orange pumpkins with their fake, happy faces is enough to ruin my mood. For nearly 2 decades, I've carried a deep hatred for this holiday. The laughter, the costumes, the endless masks. They remind me of a night long ago that I can't forget, even if I try. My daughter, Lily, she's still young. She doesn't understand why her dad turns into a Halloween Grinch every October 31st. She asks me why, again and again, and each time I avoid her questions. I don't know how to tell her the truth. How do you tell your child that Halloween brings back memories so dark, so twisted, that speaking them aloud feels like opening the door to a nightmare? These memories, they aren't just in my mind. They claw at me, especially around this time of year. I can feel them scratching, waiting for me to slip up, to let them come rushing back. I've buried them deep down, but every Halloween, they rise like spirits, ready to haunt me again. And tonight, for reasons I can't explain, I feel that maybe it's time to put it all down, to write out what happened that night. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to face the truth, once and for all. I have a family now, a wife who knows I don't like Halloween but doesn't know why, and a little girl named Lily. She's everything to me, full of life and curiosity, asking questions I wish I could answer. She sees the way I tense up when Halloween decorations go up in our neighborhood, and the way I turn off the porch lights when trick-or-treaters come by. She doesn't understand why her dad becomes so distant every October. Lily is too young to know that her dad has memories he would rather keep hidden. I've worked hard to lock them away, but when she looks at me with those innocent eyes, I feel a pang of guilt. She deserves to know who her father really is, but I can't bear to burden her with that truth. For now, all she knows is that Halloween makes me uneasy. It was the fall of 1999. I was just an 11-year-old kid back then, living in a quiet, small town where everyone knew each other. My life was simple and safe, untouched by real fear or danger. I had 4 close friends: Jonah, the brainy one; Ed, with his freckles and chubby cheeks; Michael, the only black kid in our group; and Adam, tough and always ready for a laugh. Together, we were inseparable, spending every day roaming around our neighborhood, getting into harmless trouble. We were just kids, and in our little town, we felt invincible, protected by the comfort of routine and familiarity. But we didn't know that some things, once discovered, can't be forgotten. That year, everything changed. Every small town has its own ghost stories, strange tales that are passed down from one generation to the next. Ours was no different. There was a legend in our town, one that claimed you could summon the devil himself on Halloween night. They said he had been wounded on our land once, which left him weak here, making it the perfect place to call him up and command him. Most people thought it was just a scary story meant to keep kids out of trouble. But as kids, we were curious. We didn't believe in the devil or curses. To us, it was just another adventure, something daring to pass the time. Little did we know that messing with something we didn't understand would turn our harmless fun into a nightmare we could never escape. I don't remember whose idea it was to actually try the ritual, but somehow we all agreed. It felt exciting, like we were about to do something legendary. The plan was simple: gather on Halloween night, head up to Michael's attic, and perform the ritual. None of us really believed anything would happen. It was just a game, a prank to see who would get scared first. We convinced ourselves that we were just playing around, that this was just another silly dare. But a part of me now wonders if, deep down, some of us were hoping for a thrill, a taste of something dangerous. We thought we were in control, that we could stop whenever we wanted. We couldn't have been more wrong. Halloween night arrived, and we were ready. Michael's parents were out, so we had the whole house to ourselves. We gathered in his living room, preparing everything we'd need for the ritual: a pumpkin, some candles, and a piece of paper for each of us to write down our offerings. We were laughing, joking, trying to keep things light, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. One by one, we headed up the stairs to the attic, the floorboards creaking beneath us. It was cold and smelled of dust, filled with old furniture covered in sheets. In that dim, quiet space, the jokes faded. Suddenly, it felt real. We took our places in a circle, the pumpkin at the center, and looked at each other. This was it. There was no turning back now. We each took a small piece of paper and wrote down two things: our greatest desire and our biggest secret. It was part of the ritual, something we thought would make the experience feel more authentic. I went first, tossing my paper into the pumpkin, feeling a strange chill as I did. One by one, the others followed, each of us sharing parts of ourselves we usually kept hidden. There was a heavy silence as our secrets burned, filling the attic with an eerie glow. No one laughed or made jokes anymore. It was like the air around us had thickened, pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. With the last paper burned, we waited. At first, there was only silence, broken by our own nervous breaths. We exchanged glances, half expecting someone to laugh and say it was all a joke. But then, the room grew colder, the shadows seemed to thicken, and an uneasy stillness filled the attic. The air felt heavy, almost as if something invisible was pressing down on us. Every creak, every whisper of movement made us flinch. We tried to keep calm, convincing ourselves it was just our imaginations. But deep down, we knew something was wrong. We weren't alone in that attic anymore. Out of the silence, a figure appeared at the edge of the attic, stepping out of the shadows. Tall and thin, dressed in black from head to toe, with a face hidden in darkness. We froze, unable to speak or even breathe. He moved slowly toward us, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, echoing in the small space. We pressed our backs against the wall, too terrified to run. He stopped in the center of our circle, right by the pumpkin, and looked around at each of us. Then, in a voice that was rough and cold, he spoke. He told us he had come because we had called him, and that one of us would have to pay the price. We stood there, paralyzed, as he explained what he wanted: one of our souls. His voice was calm, almost mocking, as if he found our fear amusing. He didn't care which of us it was, just that someone would have to stay behind with him. The room felt even colder as the weight of his demand sank in. None of us wanted to be that person, but the thought of losing a friend was just as terrifying. We looked at each other, silently pleading, hoping someone would speak up, would have a solution. But all we had was the awful realization one of us wouldn't be leaving that attic. Adam was the first to break the silence, his face pale and his voice shaky. He tried to reason with the figure, to bargain, saying that we didn't mean any harm, that it was all a joke. But the figure simply tilted his head, unfazed, as if he found Adam's fear amusing. The rest of us just stood there, helpless, while Adam's pleas filled the room. The figure watched us, waiting, and finally spoke again, coldly reminding us that his patience was running out. Each second felt like a countdown, pressing on us to make an impossible choice. The choice hung in the air: heavier than anything we had ever felt. One of us whispered Adam's name, almost too quiet to hear, and it was as if that single word broke something inside him. His face twisted in shock and betrayal as he realized what we were suggesting. We couldn't look him in the eyes. The guilt weighed on us, but the terror of staying behind was stronger. The figure watched with a faint smile as our decision unfolded. It was clear he'd seen this fear before, the kind that makes you turn against your own friends. As if to seal our choice, the figure raised a hand and snapped his fingers. The sound echoed in the attic, sharp and final. Suddenly, the cabinet where Adam had been hiding rattled violently, filling the room with a loud, terrifying noise. Adam's screams tore through the silence, raw and filled with pain, as if he was being pulled into something far beyond our reach. We stood there, frozen, unable to help, paralyzed by fear and regret. The smell of burning filled the air, and his screams slowly faded, leaving behind a silence that felt like a weight pressing down on each of us. We knew then we had sacrificed Adam, and there was no going back. The silence that followed was unbearable. None of us could look at each other. Adam was gone, and the reality of what we had done settled heavily around us. We didn't wait for the figure to speak again. Instead, like frightened animals, we scrambled for the stairs, tripping over ourselves in a desperate rush to escape. We burst out of the attic and down the hall, barely noticing anything around us. Our only thought was to get out of that house, to leave behind the horror we just witnessed. The front door slammed behind us, and we ran into the night, our hearts pounding, haunted by the sound of Adam's final screams. We never spoke about that night again. No one in our town ever found out what happened to Adam. His family searched, put up posters, and pleaded for answers, but we stayed silent. We buried the truth deep inside, hoping that time would make us forget. But it didn't. Over the years, each of us drifted apart. Michael moved away first, then Jonah, then Ed. One by one, we all left that town, carrying the weight of what we'd done. The nightmares never stopped, though. No matter how far we went, the memory of that night followed, like a shadow we couldn't escape. 18 years later, the nightmares were as vivid as ever. Each of us had tried to bury the past, but it lingered, gnawing at us, waiting to resurface. We all knew, in the back of our minds, that one day we'd have to face what happened. And so, as if pulled by an invisible thread, we found ourselves back in that town, each one of us answering a silent call. The old house looked almost the same, standing there as if it had been waiting for us. The memories flooded back, clearer than ever, and as we gathered at the front door, we knew there was no turning back. This was the moment we'd all dreaded, yet somehow knew was coming. It was time to confront the horror we had unleashed. We stepped into the house, and a chill washed over us. The place was empty, stripped of furniture and life, but the memories clung to every corner. Dust covered the floors, and the walls were cracked, yet everything felt too familiar. Each step we took echoed, filling the silence with an eerie reminder of the night we'd tried to forget. We climbed the stairs to the attic, our footsteps heavy with dread. The air grew colder as we reached the top, and for a moment, none of us could move. The attic door loomed before us, a gateway back to the nightmare we thought we'd escaped. With a shaky breath, we pushed it open, knowing that whatever waited inside would finally bring an end to the secrets we'd buried. Inside the attic, everything felt darker, colder. Dust hung in the air, swirling in the faint light from our flashlights. The space seemed smaller than we remembered, crowded with forgotten things and the weight of what we had done. We formed a circle, each of us standing exactly where we had been 18 years ago. With trembling hands, Michael lit 3 candles and placed them inside a carved pumpkin we'd brought with us. One by one, he passed around strips of paper, just like before. This time, though, the atmosphere was thick with fear and regret. We wrote our names and wishes again, each of us silently hoping that this would finally set us free. As we dropped our papers into the pumpkin, we could feel the air grow heavy, thick with something dark and unsettling. No one spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts, haunted by the memories we'd tried to bury. We had come to end this, but none of us knew what it would cost. Suddenly, the familiar sound of footsteps echoed from the stairway, slow and deliberate. Our hearts pounded as we realized we had called him back. The attic door creaked open, and there he stood, just as we remembered, with that same twisted grin. He looked at each of us in turn, his eyes filled with a sinister amusement. Our time was up, the price was due. He spoke, his voice grating and cold, reminding us of the deal we had made all those years ago. We had come to free Adam's soul, to make things right, but he only laughed, mocking our attempt. He told us that while he might release Adam, we were far from free. The power he held over us was still strong, binding us to him through our own mistakes. Desperation clawed at us as we tried to reason with him, to beg him for mercy. But he merely watched, amused by our helplessness. He made it clear that we couldn't undo what we had done, that every choice had consequences. To him, we were nothing but scared children, trapped by a nightmare of our own making.